set? Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. We actually have a welcome everyone here and at home to the Tuesday, September 25th Town of Wenham Board of Selectmen meeting. We called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock and have been in an executive session, which we are now adjourned from and are ready to return back to open session. The first item on our agenda in open session, as always, is public input for items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anyone here who would like to speak, tell us something, ask something that's not on the agenda, now is the time to do that. If you're here for an agenda item, that will be later.
If you want.
Okay, hearing none.
You're going to move to me now.
Yeah, and I should say, we are typically 3 selectmen. Our third member, Jack Wilhelm, is unable to be here this evening, so John and I represent a quorum, and it's us.
That's right.
Peter, our town administrator. And as we started last meeting, we're going to have one person do all of the announcements.
And I got them all tonight.
And you've got, really, I don't know what straw you drew. There's one announcement. But John, I think you have that.
All right. Well, announcements for the Board of Selectmen. Fall 2018 BOH flu vaccine clinics. The Hamilton Wenham Board of Health, Hamilton and Wenham Board of Health are offering 3 opportunities to get your flu shot this fall. The first flu vaccine clinic will be held Wednesday, October 3rd from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Hamilton Senior Center. Our Wenham clinic will be held at the Bucher Elementary School on Wednesday, October 17th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. The final clinic will be held Friday, November 30th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., again at the Hamilton Senior Center. Flu vaccines are open to anyone ages 4 and older. The vaccine is free of charge to everyone. Bring your insurance cards. Now, why do you have to bring your insurance cards if it's free? Just to identify your...
It's for potential reimbursement from...
to the town.
carrier.
To the town.
Yeah, not to the individual.
Not to the individual, it's to the town. Yep.
So that's why. Bring your insurance card for potential reimbursements. Oh, yeah, okay. Wear short sleeves or loose-fitting sleeves. And if you have any questions, call the Wenham Board of Health with questions at 978-468-5520, extension 4.
Okay, so flu season coming upon us. The next section on our agenda are reports, and we have one report in this section, and it's our town administrator update. Peter, please.
Yeah, so a couple follow-ups from items that I had touched on at our September 11th meeting. In terms of personnel, we had a number of vacancies that we're looking to fill. We've hired a new DPW driver operator, Jonathan Keys, who's going to be starting work next week. So that's good news for Bill and his team. And we are, over the next couple days, going to be spending a lot of time conducting interviews with a number of candidates to fill 3 vacancies, one here in Town Hall, the Finance Assistant and Payroll Coordinator. We have those interviews on Thursday, and then for the 2 full-time police officer positions, we'll be conducting interviews all day tomorrow. So looking to fill all 3 of those vacancies as early as we can in October, and certainly with the police officers, that's something that'll be on the Selectmen's agenda in terms of their appointment.
And there were a reasonable number of applicants for the payroll position?
There were. Yep, and we're bringing in a good number of candidates to interview.
Oh, that's great.
One.
Sort of say under announcements.
Right.
You steal
probably should have been under announcements, and I apologize for that.
Should have been on a billboard.
Yes. So it was delivered this past weekend. It's up in the new facility at top of the hill. It was delivered on Saturday without incident, which was good. Yeah. Obviously.
Has it had any fire calls since?
No, nothing yet. And so DPW is going to be doing some finished landscaping work up around the new shed by the Columbus Day weekend. And then we'll have the ribbon cutting ceremony the last day of Fire Prevention Week this year, which is Saturday, October 13th. And as soon as we have time on that, we'll put that information up on the town website.
And if I might interrupt,
Yeah.
for those who are not familiar with Enon 1, it is the first pumper that the town of Wenham had, and it was built up here in Newbury in 1849. It's one of only 4, I believe, left in the country, and so we've got a real collector's item here, and we're kind of proud of it.
Are you expecting, I'm sorry, that the ribbon cutting will happen during the day, morning?
Yes. Yeah, likely late morning. Just
Okay.
have to finalize that.
People, okay, great.
Another project that has been talked about a fair amount, off and on, over the past year or so. The Hamilton Wenham Garden Club completed their initial planting work at the new public garden down at Pingree Park the end of last week. DPW's done a lot of site work over the past several months, preparing the soil, excavating the paths, edging, boulders. They ran a new water line down there, so.
Yeah, it looked great for the 375th.
It looks even better now, because
I was so surprised to see what a change in a
Yep.
few days or a week.
Yep. And then at the same time, as the board knows, we took down several trees and did some safety pruning in the past week or so, and are planting a few new trees down at the site as well. And the tree warden's been involved in that. So really just a great team effort. I know that the garden club will be doing a good number more plantings in the spring. And they're working with one of the Eagle Scouts on fabricating some
Yep.
benches and a picnic table and the like, so.
Yeah, I've seen the communication between you and he about the project, so
It
that's
does,
great.
it looks great. I would caution people to understand that it's a work in progress.
Right.
I kind of wish the sign that they had there had a concept of what it's going to look like, because there's just
Oh.
some plantings there, which is the
Absolutely.
intention.
Yeah.
But at first you think, wait.
Yeah, definitely much more to come. I think the
but it
garden club,
looks, from what it was to what it is, pretty remarkable.
yeah. Another update, in late spring, early summer, we had, well, in springtime, we had applied for it, and in May, we were awarded grant funding, $20,000 in grant funding through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. This is the second year of that program. About 75 communities had gone through the process the first year. We're in the second wave. The benefit to us is that we also have, our hazard mitigation plan is outdated, and it expired just last year. And so this grant funding will cover the costs of the consultant taking us through the MVP planning process and also fully updating our hazard mitigation plan. And we went through a solicitation process, written proposals, interviews, and selected Weston and Sampson to take the lead on the project. We do a fair amount of engineering work with Weston and Sampson, but they have some relatively new staff who've been hired specifically to do this kind of work with municipalities.
Could you refresh my memory on hazard mitigation, what that means, or example of?
Sure. So generally what it looks at are the areas in town that we should consider planning for, in terms of, it's a lot of drainage issues, stormwater, but it also looks more broadly at emergency management and the like. So it's our first plan was just completed in 2012. And it also allows us, having an updated plan allows us to access federal grant funds, so FEMA funds, to deal with pre-disaster mitigation. And it's really for grant funding to improve infrastructure, specifically the drainage is really the
Yeah,
key
I heard the
component.
drainage part.
Yep.
Would this have anything to do with, with what we've spoken of in the last few weeks regarding?
Different ball of wax.
It is, okay.
It's more flooding, preventing floods,
Right.
culverts, drainage.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
And it will, once we go through the planning process and have on the MVP side, which is state, and then the hazard mitigation, have an updated hazard mitigation plan, we'll then be eligible for several additional grant opportunities going forward. And then the last update, we talked about the fact that there were 2 positive mosquito tests tested positive for West Nile virus at the Iron Rail property around the Labor Day holiday. We had a week off where there were no positive tests, but then last week we had 1 additional positive test. So Board of Health has some signage out at all of our parks and ball fields, just some, tips on preventative actions that people can take. And they've reached out to all the school officials as well, and they're actually meeting again. The Board of Health is meeting again tomorrow morning, and this is on their agenda. But the way the weather's going now, not that hard frost is imminent, but it's certainly trending in the right direction. And the state, I believe, just tests through the end of September. So it's something where vigilance will, really be the best solution at this point.
So we're on our own after September. Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay, so as a reminder, the next item on our agenda is another new way that we're doing our meetings. We have a consent agenda, and as a reminder, there are a few things on this agenda. If we're comfortable voting on them as a block, we will. If there's something in the consent agenda that either of us is uncomfortable handling it together with something else, we can call it out and vote on it separately. This particular consent agenda has approval of minutes of an open session September 11, 2018, and acceptance of a 375th anniversary donation in the amount of $1,245. So if you have no objection, I'll make a consent agenda.
That's fine with me. I see no
Okay.
problems with it. Thank you.
So I move to approve items A and B in the consent agenda as presented, excluding the executive session meeting minutes from September 11th, which will be presented for approval at a future meeting.
I'll second the motion.
I guess we won't have any discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
So, consent agenda.
Oh, that went quick.
That is exactly the idea. And I guess I should remind folks, too, that I believe backup information is online with the packet.
It's all still in the
So
packet,
if someone
correct.
wanted more information, they could find it. Okay, moving on to new business. The first item is consideration of a request from Middlewood Drive residents for town removal of snow and provision of refuse collection on a private way. And John, you have that agenda
Yes.
item.
We've had this conversation before, or discussion before. Is there a representative from Middlewood?
Yes, sir.
And
Mr. President, Board, John LaLasha, 14 Middlewood Drive. I think this is the 3rd time I've been in front of the board on this issue. Again, as you know, we've been held hostage by the developers. We're in actually litigation with them over roofs and things to that effect. I had called the planning department trying to find out specifically if the as-built were delivered. I never got a call back from the planning department. I believe they have been delivered, so we're grateful of that. And I know that was the holdup the last time, I think, when we came in front of the board. As long as the as-bills were in, there would be a consideration to plow the street. And I know that the only other thing we talked about was possibly also salting. I think one of the things I brought up to the board is the plow comes down Burley Street, it picks up its blade, turns off its spreader, goes down to Old Burley and Danvers, comes back, drops its blade, and then turns on its spreader and goes back up Burley. That's 0.7 miles. To drive down to the end of Middlewood and back up is 0.5 miles. So you're actually saving 0.2 of a mile in fuel. So that's part of our hope that we can also get it salted. The residents understand driveways. The parking areas are our responsibility, and we're not looking for any consideration there. That's specifically on the road itself.
Okay. Peter, I think you do have a little bit of a, I'm sorry, John, this is your agenda.
yeah, no, thank you. Your addition of information, Peter, since we've had this conversation before, there was some outstanding issues regarding plans and so forth.
Yeah, so I can confirm that the town has received all the as-built, all of the issues. The town, going through this process, had hired a peer reviewer that was paid for by the developer, and they reviewed the as-built, and all of the outstanding issues have been rectified at this point. We have the as-built for the road in hand, which was one of the concerns of the board at the time when this was last discussed, maybe November.
Well, I believe, yeah, and again, we ran into the season. I think that the reason why we're into September now is we've been on it waiting for the as-bills to come in. It's just been an ongoing struggle.
And so just as a point of orientation for the board, back when this request was originally made, we realized that we needed to have a consistent policy across the board for the town taking on snow removal on private ways. The board approved that policy last December.
Yeah.
And at the time, because of the way the comprehensive permit language was worded in the 2004 decision for this development, there was essentially contingency language that allowed the town to take on plowing the private way if we elected to do so. That was the language. And so by adopting that policy, we weren't required to plow Middlewood Drive, and so that was really where it was left last December or so.
Now, I see in here, we're also looking at a speed limit signage.
That's on the next.
That's the next item.
That's item D, so not under this. Not under this one, yeah, that's a separate issue altogether. And I will confirm, I believe there's an email in there from the DPW director.
Yes.
About the fact that, memorializing the fact that, what was represented is in fact the case,
Right.
that it's actually, just as convenient for our DPW to take the right off Burley Street and their normal plowing route that way, as opposed to going into Danvers, which is what they do now. And that he didn't have any particular concerns about the layout of the road or anything like that, getting his equipment down there. The one thing he did specify was making clear that we weren't necessarily committing ourselves for any of the private ways to plowing sidewalks, sanding and salting. And on the sanding and salting piece, I think that the clarification is that if they're plowing down there, that they wouldn't stop the spreaders. But on a black ice night where they're doing the whole town, they wouldn't necessarily do your road, and I just know that that's something that is in the policy across the board for all the private ways. I don't think it was really a particular issue, but we just didn't want to set a precedent where that was the expectation every time that came up.
Okay, that's good information from somebody, because we didn't know that before. So I mean, we can deal with a private contract if that's the case, no specific instances. I think most of the time it's precipitation anyway, so I'm assuming that the town would be there. It's those rare occasions where you just have icing.
Light dusting. I mean, because it's generally rule of thumb is 3 inches plus or minus.
And all we've asked for is a consistency throughout the town. Yeah. And again, as I brought up, I mean, I don't have an approximate figure, but we've talked about approximately $160,000 or more, maybe $170,000 in property taxes between the 20 residents there, and taking that into consideration. And going into the second part, if I may, on the refuge, we're basically paying for that service we don't receive, because our taxes would include refuge removal. We don't currently get that. We're asking for that to be added. Again, it's a fee that we're paying through our taxes. I mean, it's the same argument. If 10 new building permits go up in the town and 10 residents are built, you don't send them an assessment on top of their taxes for refuge removal. It's covered through their taxes. So we're asking for it to be taken care of by the town. If not, then we obviously would be amenable to another resolution. But we would, the residents are requesting that the town also do refuge removal.
So that's a little more complicated.
Can we go back to the plowing
Sure,
first?
yeah.
Two questions. In the past, I had, I understand there was some concerns about weight capacity over the culvert that's in there. We have some very heavy trucks when they're loaded and plowed on. Is there an engineering design concern that there may be some either damage created by those heavy vehicle over a culvert that may or may not be adequately installed?
Yeah, so back when this came up last winter, that specific question was asked to the peer reviewer, and the answer back was that there are no concerns in terms of weight capacity or load on that bridge going down.
Would that, okay, so that would be the same even for our fire trucks?
Yep.
They actually do driver's training on our street.
Okay, good.
So just not to interrupt you,
Yeah,
but
please,
to
no,
that
go ahead.
point, there were also in that study, that engineering peer review, there were some changes that needed to be made, and they were.
Yep. Those were all
So
completed.
everything was
Oh.
brought up to.
As far as
So-
parking signs and no parking zones and all that, that was taken care
I
of
feel like there
also.
was something about a drainage.
More about
and-
drainage.
Yeah,
Drainage was
yeah,
taken care of.
yeah.
I know that the
So-
town had a liability on the developer, and that was fixed, yes.
Yep,
Right.
that was the major
That-
issue.
that is a very
You know,
wet area.
But from a plowing
Right,
perspective,
right.
that was one of
So
the
that
concerns we had.
was-
Yeah, and I believe one of the questions Mr. Wilm had was about our drainage overflow areas, and those are working flawlessly. The last storm
Yeah,
we had,
you'd
they worked perfectly.
Be a good test of
I was
that
gonna say,
this
if they
past
worked in
summer.
that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd think they'd work in anything.
Now, where it's a dead end,
cul-de-sac, yes, sir.
it's been a long time since I've been down there, so I can't remember how it ends. Is it bulbed at the end?
Mhm.
So that our trucks that are plowing can make a turn down there?
Yeah, that was something I talked to Bill specifically about, and I think he may actually be the one that's driving that route. So he's got no concerns. I mean,
He doesn't, okay.
the fire trucks can go
Yeah,
down.
back in the early part of the development, the school buses actually went down the street and came up, and then for some reason, the school department made a decision that they wanted to pick up the children at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
But they were using the street back in the beginning of development.
The buses can
Yes,
get down there?
yes.
Oh, if you can get a bus down there, you can get just about
Right.
everything.
Well, it
down.
would have had to have been designed to allow for fire
Yep.
access.
Well, that's.
Right, so,
Which is a higher standard
Which would
than.
be a higher
And the
standard.
cul-de-sac that I'm on is the same way. They ended up making this enormous
Right,
bulb at
right.
the top.
for that
Because
purpose.
they wanted it to be.
Actually, our mail room is in the middle, so it's even a larger cul-de-sac, because the mail room and the pump house
Right.
for the septic field is in the middle.
Yeah, okay.
I think I remember reading something about snow removal. I don't think that this agreement would allow for snow removal.
Yeah, so that's in the policy for all private ways,
Right.
is we're plowing, but ultimately, we can't be responsible for trucking any snow out of there. You know, if we
Right,
have
just
a
wanted that to
really
be
bad
clear.
winter.
We understand that, yes,
It's
absolutely.
not that's the
Absolutely, yes.
policy.
Including sidewalks?
Yeah, no.
We're not
that's-
doing
we're not-
sidewalks, right?
Yeah, not plowing sidewalks and not doing snow removal. That's right, in the policy for all private ways.
If I might make a point to one of your earlier comments, yes, you do pay property taxes, but you bought in a private development.
No, we understand that.
And generally, these things are not allowed
Correct.
Beyond there.
Just the point that our tax rates are the same as a private
Negotiating with a
resident.
new development coming up over here, and they're responsible for everything from the edge of the road line in, septic, everything. you know.
Correct.
Whole shooting match is there, so.
No, I think my only point was our assessment is the same as a private resident. It's no different.
Yep.
So moving this ahead a little, our agenda item
Yep,
contemplates refuse collection,
right.
but our motion does not. And the information that we have on refuse collection is fairly recent.
Yeah, so I can touch on that, because again, that is a little more complicated. So there's really two things to touch on. The first is cost. So I reached out to Casella, who the town is under contract with for refuse collection, trash recycling and composting. And our contract with Casella does not have specific language to speak to added volume. And it basically cites the then existing number of households that they were going to service. And so had asked for Casella to provide a response back on what the incremental increase would be. And essentially, they extrapolated a per residence rate, and then multiplied it by the 20 units down on Middlewood Drive, and arrived at a monthly increase of $380. So it's just over $4,500 a year more that the town would have to pay. That's just for collection. And then if you add in recycling and trash disposal and composting disposal, it would be on the order of $6,000, $6,500 a year that the town would have to increase in terms of what we'd have to be paying Casella to cover this added service. So talked to town council and asked kind of procedurally what that meant in terms of the fact that there was an appropriation made by town meeting for a set figure. Mm-hmm. There's not a contingency in there for new units coming online. Yeah. So essentially, if the board, if the town was amenable to taking on this new service for Middlewood Drive, we would have to add it to the FY20 line item for refuse collection. Once it was approved by town meeting, then the service could begin. So if we, hypothetically, it's really July 1 it would start, and although we could use free cash to bridge from when town meeting approved it to the end of the fiscal year. But generally, that would be the earliest that we could potentially start this service. And then if you go back to the decision in the comprehensive permit, the wording is maybe contradictory is probably the best word for it, because in the third paragraph down on page 9, it talks about how similar to snow plowing, the town may elect to, the town shall not, but may elect to provide these services. It lists snow plowing and trash removal as one of those, so it would seem to give us some discretion about whether we would want to take that on. But then the next paragraph down that says the following conditions shall be conditions in perpetuity and running with the land. About a half dozen bullets down, or actually a little more than that, it says no refuse trash pickup shall be provided by the town for this project.
Right.
So, because they're contradictory, at the very least, the comprehensive permit would have to go back to the planning board and be revised by the planning board, that second portion that I read. Mm-hmm. And if the planning board did that, and then those approvals were secured, then the board could entertain taking on trash removal. But right now, the way the decision's worded, we don't have the discretion to do that.
Right. And that bringing it to the planning board would be the responsibility of the homeowners for a change in the wording of this?
Yeah. Well, it would be the developers, I believe. It would be the developer. We have town council here if anybody has any questions.
Oh, right.
Coincidentally,
right.
for an executive session.
So, so that I understand, the snow plowing seems fairly, I get it, straightforward. But with the trash, even if we could make the decision tonight, which apparently we can't because it requires an appropriation, we think, and a change in language, it wouldn't go into effect until, couldn't really go into effect until July of 2019.
Correct.
After a town meeting. And it has, right, I had another question which has just gone out of my head. Oh, and so I guess I'm wondering what incentive the developer would have to come to the town to say, we would like this development to have trash pickup, so please revisit your...
Well, the developer's out of the picture. The trustees have taken over. The developer's left the site. that's another, we're in litigation over the roost with them. So the developers have nothing to do anymore with the development.
So this is, in my opinion, not something we're going to really be able to address tonight.
That's fine.
The
But
trash.
certainly,
Because it
we can
sounds like
circle
there are a
back and-
few more questions.
I mean, I think through JRM right now, we're paying about $8,300 a year. So if we can, any reduction would be greatly appreciated.
And is that all WIN? Is that collection and disposal?
Yes,
Okay.
unlimited on both
Okay.
trash and recycling.
Okay. And do you get
Stick with
composting? Or not? Probably not.
Some residents do, yes, but I believe they have to do it, they have to take it to the town center.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest then that we finish our discussion and take action for or against the request for town removal of snow, which is actually the motion that we have.
All right, I'll make the motion and we'll have further discussion. I move to approve commencement of town removal of snow from Middlewood Drive this winter, consistent with both the town's policy for snow removal on private ways adopted on December 5th, 2017, and the conditions of the July 2004 comprehensive permit that governed this private way.
I'll second that.
Okay. It seems to me that, given that the road conditions and geography are okay, acceptable by our vehicles and so forth, and it's not taking our people and equipment out of the way or put them in harm's way, it doesn't seem like there's going to be much additional liability or cost. So I think I'm in favor of.
Yeah, I don't really see a problem with this. The language of, in terms of the motion, snow removal this winter is a little vague, but I guess it's kind of obvious. Since we haven't had any snow yet, this will start with the first snow plowing. So, yeah, I have no further discussion or questions.
Okay.
So, ready to vote?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye. Unanimous. So, snow plowing anyway. Do you have any other questions relative to snow plowing that we
No,
can talk
no.
about? Okay. The next item, actually, I guess, speaking,
leave the
I'm wondering why is he
leave the-
still standing there? Now I guess, sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake.
Not that easy.
No. So the next item also has to do with Middlewood Drive. This is actually my agenda item, and it's consideration of request from the Middlewood Drive residents to impose a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit on a private way. And again, my understanding is that we, the Board of Selectmen, in this particular issue of speed limits, have the authority to set a speed limit. How cool is that, right? How many things can we do?
You don't have to go through MassDOT
No,
for
no.
this.
And why
one thing.
15? Why not 20? Or
Well,
why
that's
not 10?
that's a question I actually would like to ask. I think a collaboration between you and some folks in town have come up with 15. But
Yeah, how did that come about?
So what happened, and
I know
again,
you have some
just
knowledge on
some
speed limits.
some background. I spent 37 years in law enforcement.
There you go.
32 years in New Hampshire, 30 as a state police captain. I retired as a captain. I'm currently the chief of police in Beverly, and I've been there since 2013. So yes, I do. And what we did is when the trustees took over from the development, one of the concerns we had was parking and speed limits and things like that. And it's particular over the past about 6 months, some families have moved into the area. There's a lot of children that they weren't there before, especially when you come down the bridge and into the first couple of houses, there's children on both sides. And we brought it up at a trustee meeting and then at a yearly meeting of all the residents that the speed limit of 15 we felt was safe and appropriate. It's been unanimous from all 20 units, so I sent out an email the other day and it was overwhelming to keep it at 15. And one of our concerns was, and I spoke to Chief Perkins about it, was this gives the authority to the Wenham Police Department to enforce speed limits and parking. Part of the whole snow plowing thing and that came up was managing it so you can only park on one side of the street. Again, that allows wide access for the fire engines to get down there. We wouldn't allow both sides of the street, and would also put us, I guess, into the parking ban regulations also for the winter. So we want the authority or to give the authority to the Wenham Police Department to enforce speed and parking signs, the hydrants and things to that effect, and more particularly, just the safety for the children. We feel 15 was appropriate.
So that brings up an interesting point. The bans, the parking bans in the winter would be in effect.
Yep.
There.
Correct.
And
Yes.
at this point, enforced by our police.
Yes.
As would this speed limit. Does that represent any issue for?
No, there's no
All
issues
right,
here.
for
There's
the chief.
nothing in the packet, but I talked to Chief Perkins a couple times about this issue back when it first came up, and then again in the past week or two. And he fully supports the 15-mile-an-hour limit, and you know, recognizes that the town could, that the police department could then enforce the speed limit and any parking issues that arose.
So that's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit from the moment you enter that development throughout the whole development.
Yes, we posted
access
signs to
road,
that
the whole
effect,
thing.
yes.
And I think, well, we'll get to it with the motion, but I think it also contemplates that the signage you will be responsible for.
Yes.
And it will be, of course, you know,
They're black and white
according to
regulatory
the
signs.
regulation
Yes.
signs, which you, again, should be fairly familiar
Yes,
with.
ma'am.
John?
Yeah, I do have another question. Since this is a private drive, and you say you have the overwhelming support, is it reasonable to ask that you have a signature page by everyone on your list submitted to the town, so that a week from now, somebody doesn't say, oh my God, I didn't know this?
No, I can certainly take care of that if you like.
Okay. Thank you.
Other discussion?
That's it.
This, again, seems like a very reasonable action to take.
Now, can we talk about parking in Beverly?
Yeah, no,
You have my number.
no. The
You
enforcement.
have used it in the past.
I will tell you, good luck, because enforcement of speed limits is, you know,
Right.
you know this, very difficult.
Well, as my neighbors remind me, I do have mutual aid in Wenham. So.
Yeah, yeah, right. It just is a difficult, you know, it's a difficult, especially in sort of an
Yes.
out-of-sight kind of place. But I'm sure the police will do the best that they can for that. Okay, if there's no more discussion, I will be ready for a vote. All in favor of reducing this, or not reducing, but imposing a speed limit of 15 miles an hour on this private way?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
thank
Thank you,
you.
Bob.
Thank you for coming. Okay, what do we have? So we'll Peter, you'll coordinate then with the signage and make sure that
Yeah.
it gets up there. and all
Yeah, I'll
that.
follow up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
One of my new favorite topics is next. So the next on our new business, letter E, has to do with a 40 Hull Street project, which is a Habitat for Humanity project, and it has to do with authorization to execute a comprehensive permit application and a letter of support for Habitat to move forward with the state with this project. So you have that under E.
Yes, and do we have a representative
And we
here?
do. We have Don Preston here. Do you want
Oh.
to come up, Don, in case we have a random question? Because, as you know, we may have had a few in the last few days. But you've answered them all. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. You've been here before.
Yes.
And we've been supportive of your development and effort. Can you advise us as to what your changes will mean, or what we need to?
Well, this is an application for a comprehensive permit, a 40B. So this is just the application. It requests that the city manager, town manager, and the chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust sign off on this application. It goes to DHCD. They'll review it, then it'll come back to you again for your acceptance.
Okay.
And the one tricky part here in Wenham is that it asks for the
Executive.
sign off of the chief executive official.
Which
That's
would
not
be-
me, that's the board here.
Right, that's-
In Wenham with our form of government, so that's why it's just before the board.
Right. So when you say it comes back from the DHCD, we'll get I've forgotten what it's called.
Letter of
An eligibility letter. That would be the next thing that would happen.
Yes.
How long does that typically take?
It should be
Probably typically is a hard word.
30 days.
Okay, so they turn these around relatively quickly.
Correct.
Okay.
Great. All right.
Should be, again.
Any more questions?
Well, I do, but
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just not really kind of comments. So thank you very much. We received a copy of the application, and in our way, we looked at a few things, and there were a few things that seemed to not make sense to us. So thank you very much for working, and to Margaret, our planning coordinator, and also to our Affordable Housing Trust chairman, and myself, and Peter, who have just taken a review of this, and now feel really comfortable that the application reflects the reality of, you know, what's on the ground. So thank you for your cooperation in helping us, I think in helping you also, make this application as accurate and therefore hopefully as expediently processed as possible. And the other thing I will comment on is that, as Peter said, the letter of support that's in here will come from the Board of Selectmen and will be signed by me as the chairman. With your permission, John,
Please.
because we have because I'm very interested that this is as open a process as possible, I would like to just read the letter that we're intending to send. It's not very long, just a couple of paragraphs. So that everyone, it's online in our packets, right?
Yep.
So everyone understands. This is the letter that people who've been around for a while will understand why I'm a little sensitive on this issue, but it's worth taking a moment. So it is to Don Preston. The Town of Wenham Board of Selectmen supports the Habitat for Humanity North Shore application for 2 units of affordable housing on 40 Hull Street, Wenham, Mass. At its July 24th, 2018 meeting, upon recommendation of the Wenham Affordable Housing Trust, the Selectmen unanimously voted to support $230,000 in funding for the acquisition of the property. This project clearly fits the mission of the Affordable Housing Trust's action plan, therefore the town's action plan, which is, in part, to guide the allocation of trust funds to most effectively address Wenham's housing needs, including, but not limited to, achieving and maintaining compliance with Chapter 40B through initiatives that foster appropriately scaled, located, and designed affordable mixed housing, income housing. More specifically, the project fulfills a priority initiative, again, of that plan. It's been adopted by the Selectmen and the Trust to actively promote the construction of appropriately scaled, again, and located SHI-eligible housing on privately owned property. It goes on to, you know, we look forward to a partnership. But at least in the Trust's mind and in my mind, hopefully in John's, this project very closely aligns with one of our important action items for the
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust and therefore for the town. So that's the entirety of the letter of
Thank
support,
you.
in case anyone's interested. Okay,
Well done.
that's all I have to say.
All right. I move to approve the letter of support and authorize Catherine A. Harrison on behalf of the Select Board to execute the letter of support and the comprehensive permit application to the DHCD for the Habitat for Humanity project at 40 Hull Street.
So
I assume that's in Wenham.
that is in one.
Yes.
So I'll second that, and I just thought of 2 other quick things. Margaret, you've reviewed this, and everything that you saw, you're comfortable with this application now, as it?
I was.
Okay, great. And do you have anything else before we vote?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
All those in favor? Aye.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We look forward to proceeding.
And the open house won't be until what, the spring?
Yeah, of 2020.
Oh, that's right.
Let's get
Looking
to
to break ground
let's get to the closing first, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's letter E. F is a review of the FY20 budget guidelines. So when was this? September, last week?
Last Tuesday night.
Last Tuesday night.
I was going to say, where were you?
I was here. Actually, I was the only selectman here, as it turns out, but it was all a blur. We had a regular meeting, and Peter and the Finance Committee was here for the second part of it, and Peter gave a presentation, as he has done now. This is the third year? Fourth year? Yikes.
Time flies.
Of sort of a review of, what am I thinking of? Budget forecast
There we go.
for FY '20.
Yep.
So we had a very interesting discussion. Well, it was an interesting presentation. It wasn't too much discussion because we all had to sort of absorb that. But to the point, I'm going to ask Peter to speak to this in a minute, but to the point of process and of where we, budget guidelines, I think we're at a preliminary budget guideline stage, but in the presentation on page something, it was the last page of the presentation.
Yep.
Page 13. Peter, you, as part of the process, talk about your sort of recommendation on how we should proceed relative to the department heads, at least moving forward for now, with guidelines. And those guidelines are the guidelines that we've been using in the past.
Yeah, and so that was, just based on the fact that the board didn't have quorum.
Right, so we really didn't
Last
have a
Tuesday,
chance to discuss
there wasn't a way to
I
discuss
talked to
it.
myself a lot, but.
Yeah, I mean, we had some discussion with the Finance Committee, but generally the policy direction for how to approach the budget building process, starts with the Board of Selectmen, and not to dive into the details of the presentation, but I guess very, very high level.
Overview.
Our starting position, based on a number of assumptions, and they are consistent with the assumptions that we have used at the start of the budget development process over the past several years. We look to be starting FY '20 at a $150,000 deficit, and that is on a $19+ million budget. That also assumes that we would have $650,000 in available free cash to use on the revenue side. So it's $800,000 over, but with the free cash, we'd just be $150,000 over. Some ways that we've gotten in a little better position, starting position this year versus last year. The major driver on the revenue levy capacity side has been the increase in new growth, more than we projected last year. And going forward with some of these larger residential development projects coming online, we're basically doubling our projected new growth from $100,000 to $200,000 starting in FY '20. So that's created a good amount of capacity. And on the expense side, the major driver there that has given us a little more breathing room is that the enrollment shift impact, and this is based on projections, but it's two separate projections that were pretty consistent, is essentially dropping by 50%. So last year it was over $300,000, and it looks to be only about $150,000 this year.
I thought we'd ever say only in front of that number.
So that all remains to be seen once we get the actual enrollment numbers that have been approved by DESE, end of October, beginning of November. But for right now, based on the projections, we're really plateauing on the enrollment shift projected for this coming year, which means that we're only really feeling the impact from the previous 2 years because it's the 3-year rolling average. So all that being said, it certainly is going to be, a lot of work to deliver a balanced budget within our existing levy. And that being said, my recommendation is to follow the process that we have over the past several years in working with our department heads and developing their initial submissions that will be reviewed by the board later in November. Just looking at level services with really any changes that are significant, having a really compelling rationale behind them, and status quo on staffing. So that was, you know, what was in the slide deck from last week.
Yeah, that looks good. I guess the only comment I would have at this point is to simply reinforce the line of communication with the school department, because how things were handled last year, I was not happy with at all. And I think there needs to be a significantly improved line of communication and sense of cooperation coming this way. I know how tightly we run our budgets here. I've been at it now 12 years, and you know, we take no prisoners. I mean, we don't spend what we don't need to be spending. And it's not an easy task to do, and our department heads work very hard to do that. So I think we need to be better assured that we're getting that from the other half of our budget.
And I will say, after the meeting last Tuesday, I think on Wednesday or maybe Thursday at the latest, I did send an email to the superintendent and assistant superintendent, send them copies of both the presentation and the backup, same materials that the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee have and what's posted online on the website in the packet. And just, you know, reach out to them, start talking about trying to get a date on the calendar for our now standard tripartite meeting with Hamilton school officials before they start their budget process in earnest, so that we can again communicate our ability to pay. And you know, we have the forecast, the projections assume for now a 3% net operating increase on the school budget.
All right, not to take anything from you, but if you could cue me into when these meetings are, I really would appreciate being to as many as I can make with the school system.
Yeah, and any meeting that we would have would really just be about the logistics of scheduling the meeting with you know, the school committee and Hamilton Board of Selectmen and Hamilton FinCom, and you know, the big square table.
Right, that enormous thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So relative, I agree with John, but relative to our town budget, I, you know, very much agree with the notion of level services, but I also, with the usual conservative nature that our department heads take, encourage folks to bring forward things that have a very compelling reason, that might be changes. I wouldn't want to not do something or not hear about something that we may not be able to do now, or is more important than something than we are doing, because we're saying, oh, yeah, you have to sign in blood. So they get it. Level services, no one's going to ask for anything pie in the sky, but I'm not opposed to hearing about something that's very compelling that would require additional cost or require cutting somewhere else.
Okay.
And I think, as we have said in the past, as we did last year, for many years it was perceived that the town cut its budget to support increases at the school district level, and I think that we've agreed in the past couple of years that we're beyond that point, so that, you know, we have to budget for the towns and what the town needs, and the schools may be facing an override, they may not, but their budget is, we can only put into our budget what we can afford, not at the expense of our own services.
Which is essentially what the schools said as they worked through their budget process last year, is we've met you in the middle the past 2 years to the extent that they felt comfortable doing so, and had delivered a level services budget, and they thought there were areas that were important to fund for this fiscal year and going forward, and so that was the conversation that was had, and I think it's a fair position for the towns to take as well.
And it makes it especially useful for our communication to them, your communication to them, of what we believe we can afford at this early stage, so it can inform their entire process. But that's all I have on that.
Thanks.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, so that is the last item in our, under new business, and also in our open session for this evening. We do have a second executive session. I think procedurally, we need to have a motion to adjourn from open session. Oh, sorry, Margaret?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Tony Bahiri is planning on being here. He's just, he couldn't make it till like 7:30, quarter of his.
Tonight?
Yeah,
Okay.
ZBA.
because
Oh,
And I've
Yeah.
got-
the ZBA have a posted meeting, right? So they'd have to call their meeting to order and then go into executive
They had
session.
a posted meeting for 7. I posted it
Okay.
early just in case.
Right.
Okay.
They're not here yet. Catherine, I'm sorry.
Oh.
We'll
I'm
prob-
expecting them soon.
We'll probably just recess, I would say.
Do we do need to
Go out
adjourn
of-
from open session, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll adjourn and recess?
So, second?
Yeah, 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 I think that is cleaner. Okay,
Yes.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we've adjourned from open session.
then
We'll
we
take a
have-
recess
then we go
until
into-
we have all of our members here, and then we'll make a motion to go into executive session.
I'm getting a cross-eyed view over here.
No.
No, executive.
Well, for the motion. All the motions.
Thank you, Catherine.
So for our motions. Okay, for the Board of Selectmen. I move the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, as I do. This is for Maple Woods for 200, and also 253 Larch Row. And we are inviting to attend with us the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Planning Coordinator, our Town Council, and our Town Administrator. And are we returning to open session, or so we're going to adjourn? To adjourn.
I will second your motion.
Okay. Roll call vote?
Aye.
Yes. Okay, so I think we got that part out of the way.
Your turn.
Your side of the table.
Similarly,
Ditto.
Right.
we are in open session right now, and I'd like to entertain a motion, or I guess I can move.
I think you
I'd like
can
to
move that. You can move that
That
one.
we move to executive session, and in connection with that executive session, that we invite the selectmen, town administrator, town council, planning coordinator, to join us for the matters which have been identified by the selectmen for discussion in executive session.
To adjourn directly from?
To adjourn directly from our open meeting.
From executive session. Will not be returning to an open session.
Okay, we won't be returning to open session.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
And it needs to be a
And
roll
it
call.
has to be roll call.
Copy.
The Harry, yes.
Vegan.
Campbell.
And now you're in executive.